You're now live, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so before I start the meeting, good evening. I'm Councillor Chris Payne, Chair of this committee. I would like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet via the Council's website and will be capable of repeated viewing. The images and sound recording may be used for training purposes within the Council. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, can everyone please keep to the following guidelines for speaking? Councillors should only use the raise your hand function to request to speak. Only speak when invited to do so by the chair. Please switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking, and remember to set your mobile phone to silent for the duration of the meeting. Any views expressed by any speaker in this meeting are the speaker's own, and they do not necessarily reflect the views of the council. Please can councillors be aware that the webcast will continue to be streamed live 20 seconds after the close of the meeting. This is due to a time delay in transmitting live. I will now confirm the names of the other members of this committee: Councillor Bell, Councillor Clark, Councillor Collins, Councillor Cross, Councillor Gruby, Councillor Armacuan, Councillor Quinn, Councillor Reddy, Councillor Siddle, Councillor Sisand and Councillor Joe Taylor. Do we have any apologies for absence? I have one from Rachel Quinn. She may be late to the meeting. But other than that, I haven't had any other apologies. Have you had any, Rachel?
No others, Chair.
Thank you for that. Okay, I take it nobody else has heard of any? No, okay, I'll take that as that was the only apology. So the next item on the agenda is disclosures of interest. Does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests? No? Okay, good. Do we have any matters referred to the committee under the call-in procedures? I haven't had any. I'm not aware of any.
None, Chair.
None. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Take it everybody's managed to read the minutes of the previous meeting. Has anybody got any comments, any questions? Okay, could I have a proposer for the minutes then, please?
Chris, I had a question. Sorry.
Ah, sorry, Rachel, you are here. Sorry, I've given your apologies, but you're here after all. Okay.
Yes, but on that note, I think Joanna Collins had sent apologies.
Has she? I hadn't seen it myself. Okay, we'll take that as.
I think it might have been on WhatsApp.
Okay.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, just on the minutes, we had a discussion about the state of public toilets, and it's on page 3. Members discussed the condition of public toilets. It was agreed the Executive Director, Resources, would undertake a site visit. Has that happened, and is there any action?
Martin's not here. I don't know, Andrew. Have you got anything in that area?
I think the leader's going to update. I think.
Sorry, Anthony.
Yeah, I understand that the site visit has taken place. There's currently an individual exec decision going through the process at the moment, which will set off some initial works to toilets in Buxton, Chapel and New Mills, along with some works to the toilets at the Town Hall. That's just going through financing at the moment and will be out within the next couple of days. Okay, and that'll be sent to members of the committee, Anthony, yeah? That'll be sent to all members, Chair. Okay. Thank you for that. I can see that Linda's got her hand up as well.
Yes, I can happily confirm that that visit to the toilets did take place. It's the most exciting time I've had in Buxton for some considerable time. You can tell how deprived I am. But yes, Martin was extremely helpful, and I'm really pleased to say that he's moved it forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Linda. Okay, so thanks for that, Rachel. So that matter having been cleared up, were there any other questions about the last minutes? If not, could I have a proposer for the minutes? Oh, I'm struggling to see. There's Bob McEwen, and who's the other person?
Nev Clark.
Hi, thanks, Nev. Okay, that allows me to move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Select Committee Work Programme. I know that we have an asset management working group on the 24th of June, so that will pick up one of the larger items from the work programme. And I'm also going to talk about some additional work that Martin's proposed on artificial intelligence a bit later in the meeting. Has anybody got any other questions or queries that they want to raise about the work programme? Okay. With that, then I will move on to item number 7, which is the Corporate Peer Challenge Report. Before I do that, I was asked to defer the annual report to the next meeting. I don't know if you just want to say something about that, Andrew, before we move on to the Corporate Peer Challenge Report.
Yeah, no problem, Chair. I think we've got a performance management subcommittee on the, I think it's the 20th, the week after next. So it's appropriate, after discussions with yourself, it was more appropriate for that committee to have the annual report alongside the new performance framework, and then it can come back to this committee at its next meeting.
Okay, someone else has raised their hand, or I think they put it down again. Oh, sorry, Councillor Sizeland.
Sorry, I just didn't jump in quite quick enough then. Can we, at the communities, can we bring up the closure of the care homes and the residential homes and the daycare centres? Can that be brought up at the next communities meeting, please?
I guess that might be one for you, Rachel, as you chair the communities meeting.
Yes, we have discussed that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Okay, unless there's anything else for Anthony on the annual report, then we'll move on to the Corporate Peer Challenge Report, which is item number 7. Now, I'm not entirely certain who's presenting here.
Yeah, if I start as often, Andrew will fill in with the rest.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That works for me, Anthony.
Okay. The report before members this evening is the report back from the Local Government Association and the peer review team that came in to see us a couple of months ago. Members will be able to see the details within the report. I mean, essentially, the main headline is that they are reporting back that the Alliance is impressive and continues to be effective. They're showing that both councils have been seen to be well-managed organisations over many years. There is sound financial management and attention is paid to maintaining good governance and managing risk. Both are performance-focused and can demonstrate the delivery of services, and that they are high-performing and low-cost with a value-for-money focus. So that's the sort of the good news in terms of the headline, but there's always the opportunity to be able to do more. And as members will be able to see within the report, starting at section 8 within the cover report, but also detailed within the report itself. At 8.6, there's 8 recommendations that the peer review team have made to the council, and those are around sort of being able to drive us further forwards. And they're addressing sort of a number of issues and points that were raised by both members and some of our partners that were interviewed as part of the peer review process. And essentially, Chair, the next steps following on from that is that we'll come back to members with an action plan shortly. And to a certain extent, partly by chance, but partly sort of as good process, we've already started implementing a number of the measures various ways. And in particular, sort of recommendation 8, which was talking about us going for external verification around our housing service. It's almost as if we planned it, but we ended up with a very early inspection by the social housing regulator earlier on in May. which involved quite a few members of staff, including the new housing board and members sort of being interviewed by those inspectors. We'll get the report back on that. We expect possibly sometime between July and August. But as they're a new organisation, it's sort of taken them time to set up. So that sort of helps us to be able to get that recommendation done quite early on. The rest of the recommendations, we're working those through shortly. And as part of the measures that will go to the performance measurement sub in a couple of weeks' time, some of the measures that are detailed within the recommendations will partly be addressed by those, but we'll then come back with a full action plan. And then the final stage of the process is that the team, and hopefully pending any retirements or any other shenanigans, etc. like that, we will end up the review hopefully before the end of the current operational year rather than the financial year. And again, we'll come back to members as soon as we've got confirmation and details on that. And with that, subject to anything Andrew wants to add, happy for comments or questions, Chair.
Okay,
nothing to add, Chair. Open up for members for questions.
Thanks for that, Anthony. I guess one thing I would sort of draw people's attention to what is on page 17, section 8.3, it said the peer team found that the alliance is impressive and continues to be effective. So I thought that was a fairly positive statement to make.
It is, Chair, and I think, you know, particularly sort of you read through the report itself that's come through the peer review team, to a certain extent they're saying, yeah, we're good at doing what we're doing, but, you know, is there the opportunity for us to be able to do more and do more of what we're doing even better than what we're already doing it? So that's encouraging, and the sort of the pointers that they're giving us in terms of the recommendations will help us to be able to focus both on improvement and being able to try and do more whilst we're still in the current and likely to be continuing whatever the result of the festivities on the 4th of July, potential fun challenges and otherwise from government.
Okay. So, and I also noted that there was a couple of recommendations. I think recommendation 2 was looking for us to pick up a little bit of pace on our digitisation programme. I'd just like your thoughts on that, if we could, Andrew. And also 9.1 was looking for an action plan, although I note that it says that this will be presented to members in the next few weeks.
Yeah, do you want me to come back, Chair, on the digitisation point?
Yeah, if you could, please.
I mean, obviously, the council's approved its digital strategy, access to services strategy, and organisational development strategies 2 or 3 years ago. We created an action plan for delivery of those. The implementation is all centred around a service review programme, which includes reviewing all the processes across the alliance, service by service, and also includes a complete relook at the IT provision to sort of to modernise the IT. And the members who've been here in the previous administrations will know that we've got a number of sort of outstanding IT implementations, system implementations, particularly around our housing and planning systems. So that we've created a programme called Alliance Our Future. It's been prioritised. The first 2 service reviews are complete, and as I understand, members have been engaged in those processes as part of the, if you like, the service review discovery phase. Those are ready for implementation now, Chair. So when the peer challenge team arrived, they were pretty impressed with the methodology that we'd implemented and also the outcomes. And I suppose in a way they were sort of encouraging us to put the foot on the gas, I think was the expression, and put some sort of oomph into the delivery of the process. I think it's one of those things where we've taken our time because it's a significant amount of investment for the 2 councils. But over recent weeks, we're at the point really where we can. I feel we're on the cusp of the delivery of some of those. So we're sort of mobilising in line with the recommendations to make sure that all happens in good time. And there'll be a report coming through that sets out some of the investment that's required. I think one of the things that's a challenging item is that we've made real good progress with offering our services online, and I think the external people who've reviewed what we do have been really impressed. But in order for that to work, we're putting a lot of manual effort in behind the scenes, and that involves a lot of manual rekeying of data that comes through the customer channels, and we spend a substantial amount of resources on that, and I suppose the next stage for us is to make a transition into providing some additional expertise and capacity in, if you like, developing middleware, and which will actually make sure that our systems talk to each other properly and can be adjusted over time. So we're going to see a sort of transition from staff that are manually posting things into staff who've got the expertise to undertake all of that integration, and that will require some initial investment to make all that happen. But in line with the recommendation, we're making real good progress. And another thing that was sort of evident as well was the replacement of equipment, etc., that recognises the new way that we work in an agile way. So rather than reliant on thin client technology, which has small box on desktops, we're moving much more to an agile system where portable devices can be carried around and docks around. So again, we've been making some significant investment in that. So hopefully that gives a bit of background, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Is there any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask you a couple more then, Andrew, if that's okay.
Chair, Joanna's got her hand up.
Sorry, Joanna, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is about climate change, not surprisingly, but I would like to be, I mean, this has been brought up before, that sort of confusion about resources and the programme of work and accountability. So I know that our plans are in fact very ambitious, but it would be nice to know how the confusion is going to be sorted out.
Just in response directly to that, Chair, that I had a conversation with Councillor Todd, the Exec Councillor, last week. It's something since the CPC report, the reflections from that, and actually reflections from our own organisation and the sort of things that you've raised before, Councillor Collins. Then there's a sort of massive array of ambition around the climate change strategies and action plans, and I suppose in a way we've got to really crystallise exactly what the council needs to do, and then actually the second part of that is to make sure we've got the resources and allocated the responsibility to deliver all of that. So again, we've done some work. I've commissioned some work internally to actually take that agenda forward. So that's not far off being completed now. I mentioned it to Councillor Todd last week. So we've got a session at my management team where we're just going to set out exactly what the ambitions are, exactly what's required from each of the heads of service, because it sort of cross-cuts, as you understand, across the organisation. Yep. And there's various different elements, etc. So yeah, so that's in hand actually.
Yeah, good. And
Chair, if I can just add as well, we're also investigating some. APSI have put together a new scheme around sort of some of the performance management and performance benchmarking, because as I think the couple of members that are also on audit will be aware, sort of the conversation that took place at audit was around, we just need to find a good way of being able to make sure we're able to measure that progress properly, because to a certain extent, sort of the scorecard, I think the first year it was probably useful. This most recent version of the sort of emergency scorecard, I don't think it was particularly useful particularly for district councils. I think part of the scoring mechanism that they had wasn't sort of helpful for councils that don't have any of the transport or more more
Yeah.
significant infrastructure responsibilities. But I think there is a need for us to be able to make sure we've got a proper performance management framework in place to be able to make sure now we've got the staffing resource in place, along with the other changes that Andrew's working through the management team, to make sure that we've got a good way of measuring progress. And we're exploring this option around the potential scheme from APSI, but we'll also have a look for others just to make sure that we can get something that we can both measure our own progress with, but also be able to see what progress we're making, compared to other similar councils. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I think in a way, well, it's prioritising, isn't it? It's also, I think the climate scorecard, we've discussed it before. I think we just ignore it, frankly, unless we get questions from external people, and then we can say, well, it's external, it's not how we measure our progress, and it's flawed. But I doubt if many people really even notice it, honestly, apart from those in the, in that kind of world. It's it's measuring ourselves, I think, that's really important, and also prioritizing so that action is easier for the officers.
Yeah, just in response, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. So the only trouble is our external auditors sort of didn't have the same view, to be fair. So that's an issue for us, and as the leaders explained, we'll be looking at sort of alternative ways to sort of judge our performance.
Yeah. I guess there was an element where they did. Oh, sorry, Jean, I'll come back to you in a second. I guess there's an element where they did. So on page 40 in the 4th paragraph, it talks about the capacity in place currently for the Alliance to achieve everything which it is setting out to do. I guess that sort of refers to it in some ways, Andrew.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, I mean, almost all district councils will have challenges around capacity, as we know, because we're multifunctional. Interesting, in the CPC, they were quite surprised. They didn't really get a lot of sort of whinges about lack of capacity when they interviewed the various stakeholders, including the heads of service and staff, which they were quite surprised at. But I think in many ways, I think that's where the sort of Alliance has some benefits, really, because we're doing things often for 2 councils at the same time, which which allows us that little bit of extra resources comparatively. But I think the point about the climate change was they did recognise, and as Councillor Collins has mentioned, that actually, there's a big set of ambitions, lots to do, and actually lots of people were not clear about exactly who's doing it and in what order they're going to be done. I think that's the big issue, and being candid about it with members, it's something I wanted addressing a while ago, and we've had a sort of few changes in the management team, and we sort of now focused a little bit. I would have hoped it had happened before, but it's now's the time to sort of move that agenda on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Todd, I think you've got a hand up. Jean?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that at the Audit and Reg meeting the other day, we did mention to the auditors that I thought that, basically spoke about the way the climate scores were created, and I think it's that they shouldn't really take it at face value. So I don't know. I suppose they can't change their report. But also, I've spoken to David Smith. Is David on this? I don't think he is he? That we could use at least the list of things that they look at as a guide for creating more actions, actually. And I did actually pass this on to heads of service, but I haven't had a lot of response from that. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jean. I'll take Councillor Quinn before coming back.
sorry, time lag because I was looking at the report. Just a couple of things. Have they commented on the fact that we're in the combined authority and how that affects the alliance? And then secondly, do we pay for this? Is it or is it in the LG funds?
That sounds like two questions for Andrew. If you want to come back.
I don't know if the leader wants to say something particularly about the first question. They did take into account the sort of devolution changes and the fact that, you know, the two authorities being in different counties are in different positions with regard to that. And I think one of the recommendations refers to as trying to at least work through that and what the implications might be. I mean, there are no direct implications with what's been created in the East Midlands at this stage, but it's worth, you know, it's because Staffordshire Moorlands are part of the Staffordshire Leadership Board who are pursuing a similar agenda at a different pace. So it's important that we understand all that. And no, we don't pay for it. It's paid for by the LGA.
Thanks for that, Andrew.
Thanks.
Anthony, did you want to come back on the first point?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just in terms of sort of both of the points, I mean, the sort of the arrangements with EMCA, it's still very early days, and I suspect we'll sort of gather more knowledge. The first sort of meeting in with the mayor takes place next Monday. I think there's a slightly staggered start to it as compared to sort of some of the other areas, because two of the sort of the full board members are both parliamentary candidates. So the mayor can't go through the process of sort of setting up portfolios for any of them at the moment, because obviously they are partly otherwise engaged. So I suspect it's one that we'll explore more. And just, yeah, in terms of the sort of the LGA's work around sort of getting councils to do the peer reviews, if any of you sort of read the trade press, there's about 4 councils across the country that are still of avoiding them. That may well be the best way to sort of phrase it, but essentially it is part of the government sort of improvement work that's funded direct to the LGA, and they try to encourage councils to sort of go through the process at least once per sort of electoral cycle, because I think, you know, it can offer some benefits to the councils that go through it, but also in terms of the officers and members that do the peer reviewing itself. I think there's sort of benefits in terms of what you can learn from the different authorities and their different approaches to things. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Anthony. I guess having read the report, I'd say it was a particularly positive report. Most of the recommendations there are things that I thought that they would conclude anyway. I think most people on the committee would. Councillor Quinn, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for the answer. That's interesting. Are there any plans to send any of us out to, not us, but you, the executive, etc., to have a look at different councils?
I think the LGA are looking sort of both on the officer side and on the membership side.
Yeah.
I was scheduled to do a peer review at Newark and Sherwood Council, but they've had to postpone it for a little while because it was due to take place during the election period. So the priorities have changed slightly, but I suspect that'll get rearranged in due course.
Interesting. Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there anybody else want to ask a question or make a comment? The action was to note this particular report, so I think we can say that that's duly noted. And move on to item 8, which is the efficiency programme update. I'm not sure, Lyndon, are you presenting this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I understand that a presentation has been circulated with the pack, and Keith's here as well to answer any questions that we may get more from a financial perspective as well. If it's okay, I'll just take the committee through the presentation, if that's okay, Chair.
Thank you, Lyndon. That's absolutely perfect.
Thanks. So hopefully you should be able to see the presentation on screen now.
We can.
Yeah,
I can see that.
On the first slide there, there's a rundown of the areas of focus that the presentation covers. Background to the programme, objectives for the review of income and charges, a little bit about the council's gross income, our charging structure, and the next steps. Really, I think the important thing to say is that as councillors will know, the efficiency programme is integral to us maintaining a balanced medium-term financial plan. It's very much about us working smarter, and there's no requirement for redundancies, and there's no impact on delivering our frontline services. Moving on to the next slide, this provides an overview for the committee of the figures that we're looking to achieve over the coming years, and this was approved by council in February this year as part of the medium-term financial plan. You'll see there are 4 themes that we're looking at in terms of the efficiency programme. As head of service, I'm leading on the income and charges theme that we're talking about tonight. Matt Drew Arthur, interim head of assets, is leading on the asset management theme. Tanya Cooper, head of OD and transformation, is leading on project management. And Rob Wilkes, head of leisure and environmental services, is leading on council companies. And similar updates will be provided to future meetings of this committee, as I say, similar to the one that we're providing tonight. Just moving on to the next slide now. So we have a total of 7 objectives when looking at the income and charges theme. Some of those on the screen there are interrelated. So things like identifying the potential to generate additional income and considering the appetite for maximising income, concessions criteria that we might choose to focus on, also linked to risks attached to the programme. We don't want to adversely affect any particular residents in the borough. So as an example, perhaps people in receipt of means tested benefits maybe. I think it's important to remember that fees and charges affect all of our residents in some way, because people may directly pay for a service, car parks as an example of that. But if there's no direct charge, or if something's free or it's subsidised, in effect, it's subsidised by our remaining council taxpayers. The Local Government Act 2003 gives councils a power to charge for discretionary services, but I think it's important to mention that in most cases we can actually only recover our costs. We're not there to make a profit, of course. And in addition to raising income, that's really important to the council now, the other aspect that's really important from a fees and charges perspective is that they can be instrumental in helping us to achieve our borough priorities by, in some cases, identifying where a service should be free or should be subsidised. That can help us to achieve a specific priority maybe, and that's always something that we should keep under review. Members may remember this chart being included in our borough plan that we agreed last year, and it gives, I think, a really good overview of where the Borough Council receives its income from. And you can see some particularly big slices of the cake there, and fees and charges represents just over 7.3 million. More than the income that's raised through council tax there. I think there is a lot of debate in terms of local government finance at the moment, in terms of where councils are able to raise income from. Over the years, the amounts of money that we've received from central government have reduced, and it's put a greater reliance on what we can raise locally. When you compare us as a council to similar local authorities overseas, you do find that there's perhaps a bigger basket of fees and charges and various different levies that councils can call on to fund local services. Councils will be aware that when we've perhaps been on holiday, we'll perhaps pay for a bill at the end of receiving a service, and there might be a local sales tax on there as an example. And that's something that's been spoken about more in the local government world at the moment. Members may be aware that in Liverpool and Manchester, there is now a visitor levy that's been raised over the last year. Councils don't directly have the power to do that, but there is other mechanisms that can be used in order to try and introduce those kind of charges. So in Manchester, as I mentioned, as an example, that's been achieved through the Accommodation Business Improvement District. And I think over the last year, that's raised just under £3 million, which can be used to promote other events and provide enhanced levels of street cleansing in the city. And I understand in the Scottish Parliament at the moment, a visitor levy bill is progressing through Parliament for potential changes for Scottish local authorities to be able to raise that kind of income direct in future. I think it's also worth to mention that in terms of those other slices of the cake that show on that chart, the amount raised by council tax, as you can see, is 6.6 million. But the council is, of course, restricted on how much it can increase its council tax by each year, which is currently an effective cap of 2.99%. And just moving on to the next chart, this is a chart that I've inserted just since we actually published the agenda pack, but I thought it would be useful to demonstrate this tonight. And this is information taken from a local government finance model that's been produced by the Institute of Fiscal Studies in association with SIPFA and the District Councils Network. And I think what it does do quite well is it demonstrates how over the last decade, the nature of the income that councils receive has changed very much. So you can see back in 2013-14, a bigger segment of income coming from central government grant income, and how that has changed and has created a greater reliance on monies generated locally through council tax or through retained business rates. Because of the way that the government collects income on fees and charges, it isn't possible to currently show fees and charges as part of this graph, but I think it is something that will come forward in the coming months. So this slide runs through the charging structure that we set, and councillors will be aware that when we agreed the medium-term financial plan in the budget back in February, there was a very detailed appendix that went through all of our fees and charges, and the council has adopted a particular charging structure as suggested, I think, back in the day by the Audit Commission. So you can see there we've got things like full commercial charges, fairer charging, cost recovery as an example. And I thought I'd perhaps use a slide to run through some of the fees and charges that we did review early this year. So as an example, in terms of statutory fees, that would include planning application fees. They remained the same for some years, set centrally by government, but they were increased last December, I think it was. So as an example, major applications went up by 35%, and minor applications increased by 25%. I think they were last increased back in 2012. So although they feel like very big increases, it's been some years since those charges changed. And councils now have the ability to increase those charges in line with retail price index going forward into future years. The council also reviewed and changed its fees for car parks across the borough. There are also at the moment some car parks that remain free as well, in line perhaps with council priorities. Going back to planning for a second, we also raised income through pre-planning advice. Those are discretionary within the council's remit, and we did take the opportunity to increase those slightly again in line with inflation this time. Another set of fees that we looked at under the fairer charging banner there was the cost of council tax recovery. Obviously, as you can appreciate, if it is that people don't pay the council tax bill on time, then the council does incur costs in terms of collecting that late income. But at the same time, we want to ensure that we're not incurring costs on those people that do have genuine difficulties and pain. And we have some very robust arrangements in place and policies, and we work very closely with our local Citizens Advice Bureau to make sure that we can ensure that those charges are only applied to those accounts where there's been a particular issue with late payments being received. In terms of full commercial, we don't have many charges that fall into that category. But again, one that we did review was linked to pest control. We have quite a range of pest control services that we provide as a council, but there is, of course, a very good private sector market there at the same time. In previous years, one of the charges that one of the services we didn't make a charge for was treatment for rat infestations. We took a decision this year to change the approach, and we do now charge for that service, but at the same time we do apply a subsidy for people in receipt of means tested benefits. So again, that takes into account people in the area that may have genuine difficulties in making those charges to the council. And moving on to the final slide there, in terms of next steps, we continue to work with our service areas to ensure income charges are appropriate, and key to that is making sure that we've got a very, very good up-to-date picture in terms of what our services are costing us. As I mentioned earlier on, we can only set fees that are appropriate and allow us to cover the cost of providing the service. So it's really important that that level of information remains fit for purpose and up to date. And like all organisations, the council has had to deal with the impacts of inflation in recent years, staff costs increasing, and cost of living impact as well. So that is a really, really important area of work, and I know that our finance team is going to be working hard on that in the months ahead, just to make sure that our information remains up to date and we're able to set charges accordingly. And finally, as I mentioned, we will be maintaining the progress reports within our quarterly performance and financial updates to this committee. So within those reports, you'll see an update as to how the council is progressing with its efficiency programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Lyndon. So has anybody got any questions for Lyndon before I ask a couple? Councillor Siddle.
Yeah. One question I've got is we obviously get a lot of voluntary groups that do events such as the one I've just done in Norfolk Square, and we charge £89 for the admin fee for doing that. Now, that £89 is not much, but in the grand scheme of things, if an event's going to break even and make money, we're charging £89 to do the admin for that. Is there any way that we get in another way and making that free for these events that have commercial activities going on, which usually are done to fund and pay for the event, and maybe recoup the cost from somewhere else or put other fees up to mean that we can offer community groups and charitable groups a free an opportunity not to pay an admin fee for us organising an event in a park or an open space? So is that something that we can look at doing to reduce the cost down and make it more attractive to get more events in? Because like I said, the one that we did brought about 20,000 people into Glossop and really did boost the economy of the Glossop businesses over the weekend, as well as provided a free to attend event for the community of Glossop.
I think, look, just from memory, Chair, I think in terms of charitable and community organisations where there's no commercial activity, I think that the fee is waived, and I think that the fee there that Councillor Siddle you referred to for events where there is a level of commercial activity, I think it may still be subsidised that amount for charitable and community groups. But that's certainly something that we could look at and further.
Yeah, just because like I said, the most of the time that we have commercial activities going on at these events is because their money helps basically pay for the event. I mean, we were lucky that we had good weather. I mean, the gods of weather were definitely looking down on that day, but it's one of those we rely on these commercial activities in order to pay for the event, and with other licenses and everything else on top, we nearly spent they spent about £600, £700 on licenses alone in order to do the event. Now, one was a street trading license for allowing the people to trade on the street, but obviously another was the license to do the event, similar at the bonfire, similar for other events that go on in run by the community as well on our land. It's just looking at trying to make it as affordable as possible so events can go ahead.
I've got a couple, Lyndon. So I know we've got the asset subcommittee coming up, so I won't talk about assets. But if we look at the other big number on here is the council companies, which I guess what we're talking about there is North, AES, potentially the leisure services. And in 26-27, we've got 211 against it in potential efficiencies. Where do we see that coming from?
I think Andrew's just put his hand up.
Oh, Andrew's put his hand up. I thought Andrew might put his hand up.
Yeah. So the companies and they are big figures. I mean, primarily, the savings are sort of predated on commercial activity. So if you recall, the way in which the reason we set them up in our operating model is that whilst they provide 80% up 80% of the services provide a lot of the services just to the councils at the moment, but there's an ability within the TECL rules for those companies to trade, and that's one of the advantages of them. So those early savings are starting to be predicated on the ability to trade, so to provide services either to other local authorities or other organisations in the area, to be honest. So that's really, I suppose, the essence of where the savings are grounded. I think in terms of AES and Alliance North, there are ongoing savings because of the cost of sort of local authority pensions as on the payroll of the companies that aren't in the local government pension scheme. The cost of the companies is less, actually, even though the benefits to the individual is not that much detrimental anymore. Now the schemes moved to a career average scheme. So those are the sort of broad areas where those savings are sort of focused on. The Exec Council is the leader, the portfolio holder for environment and the public portfolio holder for corporate and financial services, attended a commissioning board, which it's actually for AES, which focused on the sort of financial challenges. So, and actually with AES, there are lots of complexities because we're in the process of having to revise our overall waste recycling strategy in line with the national strategy, which then will bring sort of questions about whether we generate income from charging for green waste once it's sort of taken out of the organic stream, if that was to happen. And we're going to have a similar commissioning board for Alliance North as well, which are very much focused on the commercial opportunities there, which I'm a little bit more optimistic about, because North sort of that company have got a much longer and trading record, to be fair, Chair. So that's broadly where the savings are actually targeted.
Thanks, sir. Just one comment on that, Andrew. When you're speaking to North and AES, I know that our parish councils are struggling on occasions to get quotes from builders and vendors for uplifts to their buildings. So an example of that is Hartington Upper Quarter was struggling to get quotes for fixing gutterings and things on village halls. It would be nice to see maybe a first step into that sort of commercial area, making that offering to the parish councils a bit more visible, or creating a portal for it or something.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. I'll take that offline. Actually, that's an interesting opportunity. I mean, the AES does provide services directly. AES does for a number of parish councils, actually, more ones. Cheadle, it does all the grounds maintenance for Cheadle Town Council, for example. So there are examples where parish councils have got the advantage of working through our sort of companies. So, but we haven't sort of dipped into the market much with it, so I'll take that offline. That's an interesting opportunity.
Thanks. I think some of the bigger town councils are a bit more fleet of foot, or a bit more organised. I think it's the smaller ones that struggle a bit with, who do I go to? Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got an election at the moment. Do you reckon the waste and environment policy might change again after the election and the way the collections want to be? Because obviously different governments might have different ideas, and if we have a change in government, that could have an effect on our overall business as well, and the way the models work.
I'll go back to Andrew, but I guess any change in government ends up with a review of what the new rules are.
Yeah, and I think again, the sort of strategy for waste is a long way in the making, to be fair. So, and I think probably the principles of, I mean, it's badged up as simple recycling to make it consistent across the piece. It also includes, transferring the responsibilities for waste arising to producers, introducing deposit return schemes. So, yeah, I mean, again, I'm not guessing, and as the chair's just said, when we get different governments of whatever flavour, we tend to get, new policy tends to emerge quickly. So, and over time, a lot of it, though, I suppose, is due to a lot of the sort of waste and recycling legislation is derived from EU directives. So that's all, part of the process moving on from that agenda since Brexit. So, like I say, we can only prepare accordingly, and when we have to have separate food waste collections by 2026. So that's fast approaching, Chair. So we've got to really mobilise on that. We've been given capital finance to make that happen as well. So a lot of these things are sort of ingrained, but yeah, I would imagine over time, to answer the question directly, things will continue to change like they have in the past.
And then I had one last question, Lyndon, which was you spoke about the scope for charging for services not currently charged for. I guess one I could think of is public toilets, and there'd be a fairly healthy debate to be had there about whether you charge or don't charge. A number of local authorities do. What do you see as the mechanism for consultation on some of those things that we don't charge for? I think Andrew sort of alluded to green waste there. I know a number of councils also charge an additional for green waste. I think Eastbourne Borough Council charge about £100 a year for green waste. I'm not, by the way, saying we should do that. I'm just interested in what the consultation process would be.
I think in some cases it depends on the nature of the charge that we're thinking of, but certainly, one thing that we do each year is consult in the run-up and preparation of our budget that's agreed in each year in February. So it's certainly an aspect that we could build into that consultation that we'll have planned for later in the year.
Okay, thanks, Lyndon. Okay, any more questions or comments on the efficiency programme?
Grady's got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, must be right down. Oh, sorry, Linda.
No, it's okay. It's backtracking slightly. Wormhill Parish Council have been helped quite a lot by AES, that they couldn't have been more cooperative with regard to their grave digging and things like that. Absolutely fantastic. So just made that comment, really.
Thanks, Lynn. I think it is. It's just I kept getting asked that question by a couple of parish councillors, and I'm not sure it's. I mean, it's probably a little bit of them needing to go and ask the question as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's chargeable, but so be it. But at least we're getting the good service that we know that they can provide, and it's a place to go for them. So yeah,
that's good.
Okay.
Councillor Cross.
Oh,
Holly?
can you hear me, Chair? I'll
Yes.
keep it brief. It was just mentioning about that consultation. You mentioned about public toilets, and I don't want to focus on it too much, but I was just wondering, how wide would the scope be with that consultation? Would it just be members, or will other stakeholders be included in this consultation? For example, I'm talking about like the wider public, because I mean, I can only go off my ward in general, and I've got a public toilet in my ward, but obviously, if we were to introduce a charge, I should imagine it will go down like a lead balloon, just because the public toilet was actually shut for a short while due to vandalism. And I had residents contacting me and local businesses asking me when it was going to reopen again. And I just imagine, yeah. So I'd be wary on a personal level, but I was just wondering how wide the consultation would be if there was one.
I think, Ollie, just for clarity, I used it as an example rather than a we should.
Oh! Thank you, Chair, for that clarification. It just I was just worried for a few seconds there.
Because I'm racking my brains as to what services we could charge for that we don't currently charge for, and a couple were things like green waste, toilets. So you have to go through the list, and then anyway, I think Anthony's come in there as well.
Oh, thank you.
Chair, just to say sort of, in terms of looking at toilet provision in the future, it may well be that as part of a wider review, we do need to look at, particularly for some of the more spaced out provision, do we need to look at sort of alternative how the provision's done, so using automated units, that type of thing, which if we were to start to look at that sort of thing, it may well involve a charge. There's also potential for looking at trial charges in terms of sort of some of the improvements that we're wanting to look at. So in order to be able to justify increasing the cleaning frequency, etc., and also for some of those that are getting vandalised on a regular basis, to try and sort of deter people from entering them for unsuitable reasons. It's also been advised by officers that it may well be an option to sort of add charge in there to see if that sort of reduces the potential misuse for them. But we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis as part of the wider review that will take place later in the year. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, I think. Hang on.
I've had my hand up for a bit, but
sorry, Alan.
Anyway,
sorry.
Given that the leader has virtually taken everything I was going to say, in terms of plans, they're very, very few and far between. In terms of green waste, no, there isn't any plan at the moment. So the leaders talked about the toilets, and I'll leave it at that. But rest assured that certainly you, Chris, will be the first one, well, the second one to know after me.
Well, I was just trying to find examples, Alan. That was all.
No, that's fair enough. But as I say, there's no. The medium-term financial plan is good for the next 4 years. We review it in November and then again in February. So there are certainly no plans at this moment in time other than what the leaders just said.
Thanks for that, Alan. Okay. Any more comments, questions on that? I don't think I'm missing anybody's hand. No. Okay. Fine. Can we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a verbal update on the Cultural Fund?
Chair, essentially, this was just an opportunity for members to ask any questions. We recently issued an individual exec decision, which confirmed the details for the investment plan that we had to submit. Just a little bit of background, as members will be aware, we got notified during the budget announcement that ourselves, along with a variety of other authorities across the country, were awarded a £5 million capital fund for cultural issues. We've worked with a group of stakeholders from across the borough in terms of organisations that we were either aware of or that we've had conversations with around potential investment. We've drew up the investment plan as required in terms of sort of responding to government. Our investment plan includes 4 elements to it. We're looking at Victoria Hall in Glossop, works to the Opera House in Buxton, and works at the Rock Mill Centre in New Mills and Milestone Studio in New Mills. The largest single element of the investment plan that we put together is really focused on Victoria Hall, and that will be aiming to sort of fully utilise the ground floor as is used by the Friends of Victoria Hall at the moment, but also bring back into use the second floor. A measure of works at sort of Buxton Opera House. So this is separate to the wider scheme that the Opera House is looking at, which we're obviously working in partnership with them around, looking at potential bigger funding opportunities. And the 2 schemes in New Mills, again, slightly smaller in scale, but again, looking at particular support to those 2 organisations. The benefit of us having the funding come in the way that it has done is it does mean that we've been able to release some funding that we had on hold as potential match funding for the previous Luff Round 2 bid that we put in around Victoria Hall. What we're intending to do with that funding is it allows us to put together a capital support fund for some of the organisations that we've had discussions with around being the potential to be able to bid into this fund, but they didn't quite fit the criteria. So we've got a number of organisations, including, say, for example, the Partington Theatre in Glossop, that need some urgent works doing. So we'll be able to use this capital funding that we've now got available to help have our own little culture fund to be able to kickstart some projects in those. And we're in discussions with a number of those partners at the moment to get further information, details off them, and be able to get some funding out to them that way. And with that, Chair, happy for any comments or questions.
So any comments, questions for Anthony? Just one from me, Anthony. Is the money definitely going to be there, or is there any chance it's not going to be there?
Obviously, given the timing of the election, we're sort of in the lap of the gods on that. To a certain extent, as members will be aware, there's also issues around the productivity reports that councils had to put in for some of the additional money that was announced in the budget. The advice that we're getting from the civil service on both that and the culture bid is we've got the deadlines to submit them. We'll work to meet those deadlines, and essentially it's fingers crossed and wait to hear.
Okay, well, you can't say fairer than that, can you? Any other questions for Anthony on that? No?
Chair,
hang on, Andrew. Sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, just to confirm, the actual investment plan was submitted a week Friday ago, so it's already gone into the government. I think the productivity plans, Anthony, we've got until the end of July, I think, haven't we, to be honest? But like Anthony says, the advice is that we could get them submitted. I think the difficulty with the cultural fund bid, and I think I've outlined in the report that the timescales for approval, consideration, and approval are up in the air because we don't know whether they're going to fall in. We're probably going to fall in a new minister's responsibility. So, and I'm sure that in a new government there'll be lots of sort of challenges around that time. So, because the investment plan and the final allocation has to be approved by ministers. So there's just a bit of uncertainty about that, whatever happens.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so if there's no other questions on that, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is artificial intelligence. I will make this brief. Before Martin went off on leave, he and I had a brief conversation. He also dropped me an email, which he copied Linda into as well. And the basics of it are that Martin wants to have a look at the whole area of artificial intelligence and how it helps local authorities to become more efficient. He's been looking at that, or he is looking at that with Councillor Andrew Church, who's the Deputy Chair of Resources. I think that's at Staffordshire Moorlands, Andrew, if I'm correct. Yes. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I just thought it was worth just mentioning a few things about it. I personally think it's a worthwhile area to explore. And in doing that, there is some expense in talking to other councils and going to trade shows and talking to vendors and that sort of thing. And I said to Martin, I'll just make everybody aware of that, so that, you know, if people say, well, what's Martin up to? That's what he's up to. And I did drop committee members a quick note from some studies being done by some of the London local authorities on artificial intelligence. Now, I think it's fair to say, and we spoke a bit about this earlier in the meeting, that a lot of the areas of focus for artificial intelligence tend to be in unitary authorities, with things like social care and transport, and how you make sure that your transport plans fit with traffic volumes from cameras in the streets. So there's lots and lots of data out there that helps with certain things within local authorities, but a lot of the focus from the reading that I've been doing over the last week seems to be on larger unitary authorities. That is not to say that there isn't opportunities for district councils. So I was looking at Wandsworth. I know it's a unitary authority, but a lot of its contact, they've managed to reduce 11% of their contacts as a result of using things like web chat, which just basically takes out the need for someone to directly deal with a query, because artificial intelligence does that. There's lots of opportunities, I think, in the area of urban planning and development. I know we're going through the local plan process at the moment, but I sort of suspect that by the time we get to 10 years' time, there will be a lot of artificial intelligence that's telling you the answer to where you should stick housing and how that impacts on traffic and all these sorts of things, which today tends to be poring over lots of maps and things. And also in the area of communications, which did actually come up on one of the reports earlier. But some councils are starting to use ChatGPT to put together a lot of their communications. I'm not entirely personally sure that always works, because when you read some of those comms that are created by ChatGPT, they can lack a certain amount of personalization. I mean, I can't see ChatGPT ever using the word "mither," for example. I'm not sure we'd necessarily use that in our corporate style, but hopefully that makes the point. But there are also lots of opportunities in things like stock management. So if you're looking at something like AES or Alliance North, the way that they manage their stock against demand, increasingly in the future, they'll see efficiencies in that space. So I had a sort of brief look at it. There's lots of different councils looking at this. It could be potentially that High Peak and Staffordshire Moorlands want to get involved with another district council or a couple of district councils that are already looking at this. But my commitment to Martin was that I would mention it so that everybody's aware that he's looking at it. There will be a little bit of expense in there. I can't see it being massive. And at some point, it will come back to us to say, well, this is where we think artificial intelligence is going in terms of helping with efficiency. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Andrew?
Yes, Chair. I'll just come back on a few things. I suppose in terms of articulating where it may be best applicable, most applicable for us, it will be around, I talked earlier about the digitisation of services. So you could almost see with AI that some processes could be completely automated to be 24 hours, you know, with responses, simple responses as well. I think the other thing is around productivity. We talked about productivity plans. So, you know, getting our technology right, actually, and which does a lot of the sort of grunt work for staff, then gives the staff more opportunity to provide services to people who need them, personal services, etc. So I think there are some big opportunities there, which I think you've referred to as well. The only other thing I just wanted to add is that there are some sort of potential negatives we have to think about. I think whether we adopt AI or not, I think AI presents some risks to us. So I think we've started to explore some of those. You know, it could be used for disruption and cyber attacks and those sort of things, really. So again, you know, we have to look through the sort of vulnerabilities as well at the same time. But it's a big piece of work, and like I say, I think it's linked very closely to our sort of digitisation and digital strategy.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Has anybody got any questions about AI? Any sort of comments? Oh, Anthony.
It's Bob, I think.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
Yeah. You know, I'm 70 plus back now, and I'm looking at this and how it affects things, but I sort of take it down to a practical level. Now, you try and get a bus pass renewed off the council. Absolutely horrendous. I had the experience because mine wouldn't work. You have to pay for it, no problem with that. But you try making the payment without, you know, any sort of technology. It's absolutely horrendous. And before we sort of do things like this, we've got to make sure that the people who use our services can actually use them. That's only my personal view, but you know, a simple thing like that, getting a bus pass, you think you'd just be able to go in the town hall and they'd sort it out for you. But you've got to be on the internet now, you've got to pay for it, and if you're not on the internet, God help you. You know, unless you've got somebody to help you with it. Thank you.
And I guess it's that striking the right balance between efficiency and the purpose of what we're here for, which is to make residents' lives better.
Yep. Thank you.
Now it's Anthony.
Thanks, Chair. I think to my mind, sort of one of the things that we've been consistent with both officers and throughout the whole of the access to services strategy that was approved during the last council is making sure that there will always be an in-person option in some way, shape or form for people that either can't do or don't want to do the sort of the technology. We appreciate the sort of not everyone will be able to make use of it, so there will always be some sort of personal option. To a certain extent, the potential around AI from talking to colleagues at other councils, there's a particular strand of it around anything to do with sort of call centres or that type of sort of basic call management, those regular queries that it's easy to sort of interact with. And I suspect there'll be other uses that will come along, particularly sort of more of the bigger sort of IT companies are sort of getting involved, particularly in terms of targeting those types of transactions that they can do for local councils. But I think potentially for us, the benefits could be for some of that sort of back office stuff that Andrew mentioned earlier on. There may be some options in terms of being able to reduce the amount of sort of double entry type stuff that we're doing, so that we can free more people up to be able to spend the time with people to go through alternative methods of accessing services if they can't utilise online. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Anthony. Rachel. Quinn.
Yeah, I was just picking up really on Bob's point and thinking about a lot about council services are you can't talk to anybody, you can't see anybody in person. And I do think we need to be very careful what we introduce, how we introduce, and it does sound reasonable, it really does, but I'm always mindful of how our performance management in school started, and they said, oh, we're never going to do this, we'll make sure we won't do this, and it never happens, and you've no guarantee because somebody else comes along and they change it. So I am a little concerned, but I do see that it could have advantages. I think we need to be careful though.
Yeah, and to be clear at this point, it is just trying to understand it and what the opportunities are rather than anything else. One of the government's principles on this is fairness, and it talks about that ability for people to be able to also make direct contact as well as, you know, taking
Yeah.
an opportunity from data. Councillor Siddle.
I think I was first, actually.
Oh, sorry, Jean.
Sorry, but well, of course, Councillor Siddle is part of the committee, so perhaps he should go first.
Go, Jean. Yeah.
I'm happy for you to go, Jean.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it could be used on the more technical aspects of things, for instance, but where we need to monitor things like fires with drones and such like, and also I mean, obviously we've got it partly with the bin collections because they use the computer programs there, but it still needs input from the people. That you can't just have AI on its own. I think it would be useful in the air monitoring side as well.
Yeah, so it's those additional things maybe that we don't do today, Jean, that, you know, it could, for example, you know, cars going around could tell you which trees are more likely to need cutting and things like that, which are quite manually labour intensive, and then you can do more with the money you've got.
Yeah, but there will be, you'd need a lot of investment in machinery as well to do all that, but it's not purely the software.
Thanks, Jean. Councillor Siddle.
Yeah, I mean, call centre stuff, obviously, I work in a call centre and we've introduced a program called 8x8, which gives a lot more data, a lot more information where we can go with the way we manage lines. We can also interact and do emails, and it can be done on mobile phones and everything. So I think we've got to look at modern technology that interacts and works. I mean, that has an element of AI and auto chatbots as well. But I don't think chatbots always work. I mean, I had a chatbot with a well-known low-cost airline. I won't mention any names because we're on YouTube, but it took me 3 attempts to actually get through to someone, and in the end, the final person actually authorized me so I could actually view my flight. But it doesn't always work, chatbots. We've still got to have a human being when we speak. But I do think looking at programs that can assist and give us data and look at how we can analyze the call center will be good, and analyze the lines that are coming in and maybe redirect the lines and look at sorting out the way we manage calls and the way we have the IVR system working better. But that's a really good program. I think we had a chat with the officers last time. We had the full council about that, because I do think it's a good program to use for our call centre.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I noticed that Derby City Council are partway through a pilot on the use of AI in local government now. I think it's got another couple of months to run, but they're using it for quite surprising things that I was shocked to see, to be honest. There's obvious things like calculating benefit and maximising income, and as Ed said, chatbots, which are awful, but they're also using it in adult social care to look at things like care plans, which I was really surprised at, and I can't imagine myself how that would work. But whatever suspicions I have about AI, I just think we all use it a lot more than we think we do. So we'll probably end up being really shocked about how many applications it will have in local government. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly, I think Tanya, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to come back on a couple of the areas that have been raised, actually. Just sort of for clarification, we have already engaged with NEC to look at coming up with a policy for use of AI. So looking at them guiding us in sort of some of the pitfalls and looking at, they've shared with us very recently following our last meeting with them, their AI policy, so we can look at what sort of things we need to build into our procurements and where we need to be looking so that we can engage with the technology. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention, and it was based on the drones actually that Councillor Dodd covered with Jack Bailey, one of the graduates, doing a piece of work for us to look at the use of drones and more use of videos, video reels. So lots of different other things that we can use different technology for to enhance our service delivery. So I just wanted to make councillors aware that we are making some inroads into this, and we're also working, as Andrew mentioned, with SOCTIM very closely on looking at modern technology. What we want to do is try and provide ourselves with technology that's fit for the future and gives us as many benefits as we can, but at the same time, bearing in mind our averseness to risk, is making sure it's safe.
Thanks, Tanya. Okay, I don't think I've got anybody else, so I'm going to now move on to item 11. Any questions referred to the executive member before the meeting? I don't think there were any.
None, Chair.
Okay, so then that leaves me with item 12, at which part we're going to move to part 2 to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business, as there may be a disclosure exempt information as defined in part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So Rachel, do you want to end the recording?